blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is the solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Love Show. That means it's Thursday morning at 10 a.m. We're here meeting with you. Let's give a little twinkle to Dawn Light, who's not here today because I made a mistake, which I'll tell you all about later. And you know what? I'm really excited to bring in one of my sweet friends and mentors and someone who really held me during the pandemic to talk about what is the meaning of life and how we can love ourselves more fully. So Scott Catamas has spent decades interviewing the best-selling authors and leaders of the new thought paradigm. He has built personal friendships with such luminaries as Ram Dass, Jane Fonda, Reverend Michael Beckwith, Marianne Williamson, and many others. He has learned includes the shared understanding of the meaning of life and can be seen on the ultimate self-love, not to be confused with selfish behavior. I know we're going to talk a lot about that. On this Self-Love Show, Scott will share specific tips, tools, and practices for creating greater love in all aspects of life. P.S. Scott is also the founder of Love Coach Academy and has guided thousands of clients into greater harmony in their relationships. Scott Catamas is an Emmy Award-winning writer and producer who has created hundreds of shows that have been seen internationally. His productions have been on PBS, NBC, HBO, Showtime, Fox, and UPN. He's also the founder of Love Coach Academy, is also training for relationship coaches, and this provides Scott a unique relationship skill building with thousands of tools. Since the start of the pandemic, Scott has hosted and produced over 500 original online shows, including Saturday Night Alive, Straight Talk, Sacred Sundays, and The Awakening World, one of which I co-hosted with you for some time on Fridays, which is so fun. And Scott has also worked for decades with many of the new leading thought leaders and is an esteemed member of the Evolutionary Leaders Network. Hi, Scott.
Hey, hello, Trish.
Oh, man. It's been a while since we've talked.
And we used to talk a lot because we did a show together for, I think, 2.5 years. Every week we were co-hosting together, and I really enjoyed that. I miss you.
Some on Friday nights and some on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
Thank you for working with my schedule. My ever-changing schedule.
And the Wednesday night, which started with you, I stuck. So we were still doing The Awakening World on Wednesday nights because of you. So
you're welcome. Oh, well, Scott, you're kind of the reason for this show. Like, it's your fault that this show exists.
That's true. I remember how it started. That's true. It did kind of, and let's get right to self-love, because it's an interesting time in my life right now. And I'm going to be very authentic and vulnerable today. Last week, a very malicious article came out about two friends of mine, the Twin Ray, who I really love very much. I've worked closely with them. And the writer of the article, literally, this is what she does. She goes after people. She has written very derogatory articles about just about anybody who is perceived as a spiritual teacher. She's gone after Abraham Hicks. She's gone after Byron Katie. She's gone after a lot. She's written over 20 negative articles about spiritual teachers. And apparently her background is she was raised in a cult, was traumatized by it, and is now out to just destroy anything that looks spiritual. So anyway, she wrote this really horrible article. And I felt really sad reading it. And so I immediately made a video sharing my direct experience of my friends, the Twin Ray. Well, now she kind of then saw that, and now she's written a series of articles about me that are
Oh,
extraordinarily derogatory and very negative, and it's making its way through social media. And so it's an interesting time to be on the self-love show when both my dear friends, the Twin Ray, and myself are under pretty vicious attacks in a very social media way. So it's been an interesting time to really draw upon the skills of self-love. Now, I want to say that I have gotten tremendous support. I've had so many people that love me and care about me reach out. Scott, we love you. So, as I've said, I've gotten more love this week than I have since my birthday. And I feel well loved and well supported by the people that I care about. But it's still pretty weird knowing that strangers who don't know me are like getting all this negative feedback. And then the people who don't know me, there's a lot of, oh yeah, he looks like this. And, so it's a good time to be talking about self-love. Like, wow, okay, how do we use these tools that you and I teach at a time when you're under attack, And I mean, I can't remember the last time I was, quote, under any kind of form of attack. So it's an interesting time to be on your show.
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
What I'm going to start off with is that I don't believe in cancel culture. And I know a lot of people are probably going to have a lot of feelings about this particular thing that I'm going to say. And, what I am going to precursor this with is that cancel culture is it's a response to wanting people to take accountability for their impact. And what it also is the way that we've dehumanized, we've learned to, in a white supremacist, colonialist, patriarchal society, we've learned a kind of a technique of dehumanization. And I believe that cancel culture is this as well. It is just another microcosm of this larger macrocosmic belief system. Again, I know many people don't believe this. And I do think that people need to take accountability for their impact, whoever that might be, positive and negative impact, or however people perceive that. So I just want to precursor this whole show like this because I know that this is going to come up. And I mean, because you are under such fire and the Twin Ray, and there's a lot of spiritual teachers who are really getting reamed right now. And I think that one of the things about self-love is to know like a core and inner direction, like where you want to be and what your guiding star is, your North Star. And that's a really like that particular piece. I know it takes a long time to get there. Is like, is your intention malicious? Is, where are you manipulating people to get there? To self-love, because that's not actually self-love, is it?
Right.
Self-love is seeing like, hey, I'm the worst person I know, and I'm the best person I know, and accepting that I'm not anything that I believe that I am, but that I'm capable of doing the most heinous and the most beautiful things, and to really accept that and move from one's integrity. And that means that you're showing up in your values and you're speaking truth and acting from truth of what you're speaking to. Is like, this is what I'm going to do. And if you make harm, that you're taking accountability for the harm that you've caused, both privately and publicly. And I think that that's a really powerful place. And we don't have a system in the world just to really deal with our own hurts and to help people deal with the hurts that we've hurt, So those are just my thoughts on just the start of the show, because I know it might be a spicy one today.
Good. Well, let's make it spicy. And, let's take a look at what is if we're really going deep into self-love,
Mhm.
which self are we talking about?
Yeah.
There is the ego personality self. There is, okay, I'll use myself. There's Scott Catamas, who's 68 years old, has this body, has this personality, has this history. There's that self. And that's usually the self that we think we're talking about. And we can keep the majority of the conversation to that self. But since it's self-love,
Mhm.
then we go into the deeper true self, which goes beyond this history, beyond this body, beyond this life, and is part of the whole. And the true self, which almost all spiritual teachers, most of the great philosophers, most of the spiritual teachers that have reached higher states of consciousness are aware of the multidimensional self,
Yes.
the divine self, which is the true self.
Mhm.
And when we're in awareness of the true self, the divine self, we are in the awareness that is love. The true self, the divine self, the multidimensional self is pure love. Um, and and it's something that we can try and intellectually describe, but it really is something that has to be felt. It ultimately, through meditation or through yoga or through an oceanic experience or through some, people need to actually experience that. And a lot of people experience it through psychedelics or plant medicine. Um, but really going into the true self, that is where we also experience profound self-love. And then hopefully use that to manage the day-to-day minutia of our ego, of our personality, of our human life, to stay anchored in the remembrance of our true divine self.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, those who are listening and have watched the show many times, you know what my definition of love is. It's the radical acceptance of what is.
Mhm.
Now, then when we sit back and we look at what can I radically accept what's in front of me right now? Can I see it? Can I understand it without needing to change it? Now, there's actions of love, right? So there's actions of love to love Scott. This means this. To love myself, this means this. And
Yeah.
there's actions that include that. And I'm not saying tolerate abuse or any sort of like things that don't feel good to you. Like you don't need to conform or contort to the things that are self-abandoning. But it is really looking like, well, what am I seeing right now? And so when I'm looking at myself and I'm like, oh, and I do something awkward or I do something weird and I'm like, shit, you know, I don't love this thing that I did. Like my mistake today on timing and where I thought my brain was like, that was a mistake. Did I take full accountability immediately for the impact on you and Don and my team? I got on the phone, I did all the things, and I was like, I totally messed this up. This is absolutely my fault. Now it's not like I'm a bad person. I'm a human. Unfortunately, I'm a human. Darn it. As much as I've tried not to be, but it's like, can I accept what is right now? This is what I've done. Now, I think the one part for me that has changed about self-love is taking accountability. Like this one thing has really profoundly impacted how I see myself. Because I know that I'm a human. I know that I make mistakes and I'm not, I don't place really anyone on a pedestal. I'm just human connecting with a bunch of other humans, at least in physical form. So I'm looking at people and I'm like, gosh, they're just strategies. Like their behaviors, their thoughts, their things are just strategies to get their needs met. Just something you taught me, just strategies to get your needs met. And I'm like, so I sit back and I'm like, hey, can I just accept that this is a strategy to get some need met? Whatever it may be, good, positive, whatever judgment you have, and just to like see if that resonates with me and to just show up in acceptance even with myself. Oh, this is what's happening, I made a mistake, and then show up in what is, and then either like speak to the agenda of it. It's like, oh, I am traveling. I totally spaced it. Like, that's my fault,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, and both times you've spoken today, I've heard you talk about accountability and
Yeah.
recognizing when we create harm.
Mhm.
So let's address that.
Yeah.
And uh, one way of a perspective is, and I heard you saying this, but you didn't use these words, is differentiating between the being and the behavior. And I think this is really important because when we experience harm from another,
Mhm.
let's remember that the harm came from a choice that person made or a behavior that they have.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that who they are as a being is bad or
Yeah.
evil.
Mhm.
And that's really up for me right now because you're right. All of us, the more time we spend with someone, the people that we have our deepest relationships with, well, spend enough time with someone, something is going to be said or done that causes harm, right?
Yeah.
But if we recognize, oh, that choice you made or that behavior you have impacts me in this way, that's
Yeah.
valuable. But if it goes into, you're such an idiot, or oh my God, you're such an asshole, oh my God, she's such a bitch. Once we start adding labels and start making about who the person is as a being, now
Mhm.
we're creating an enemy image and we are taking a real harmful consequence and escalating it in a terrible way, in an absolutely terrible way. And that is what causes enemies and attacking. It's what causes relationships to go toxic, and it's what causes countries to go to war. You know, I mean, there's horrible wars going on that we're probably more aware. People that are not in the battlefield are more aware of the horror going on because of the level of social media and photojournalism. And anyone who's watching what's going on in Gaza, how can we not be horrified watching what's going on there? And the only way that is allowed to happen is because the Palestinians have been dehumanized. They have been so dehumanized by the people that are they're doing it right now. And I'm not making a pro-Israel, pro-Palestine statement right now. I'm not, I'm just talking about the humanity of it. When we dehumanize someone, then we can hurt them. And we dehumanize someone by making it about who they are as a being instead of just making it about a choice that was made or a behavior that they have.
Yeah. I agree, you know, and it's dehumanization on all sides,
Hmm.
right? So, um, we don't condone negative, harmful behaviors. Like, that's not something we can do. Like, that's it's I just think that people just don't have the, like, any effective strategies of negotiating reality. I'm like,
Hmm.
"Hey, there's ways to find, like, to actually negotiate something that works." And maybe this is, a little bit too, um, like, childlike in my mind that I have faith in humanity a little too much, but I do think that when we sit back and look and just, like, take a step back and be like, "Hey, we can't murder a bunch of people, and we also can't, like, blame an entire group of people for one person's or a small group of people's actions." Like, we can't blame the entire community of those people.
Yeah.
Um, just in the yeah, the Gaza trauma is really hurts my heart a lot.
Oh my God. It's on so many levels that we are watching a genocide. We are
Yeah.
watching genocide. And God bless all those college students. I know that you're, a college student at Cal. God bless those college students all over the country that are doing occupation and protesting. Boy, I'm proud of each and every one of them. I really am,
Yeah.
and not the ones that go into violence, but um, it's really I'm keep it up, kids, keep it up.
Yeah. Well, they're doing their best, and I see it. I see it all day, every day. It's all up in my face every day, and it's
Is it?
awesome.
Yeah,
And I do things. I have my activism on the other side, on a different
yeah,
side of that.
yeah. Well,
Um,
listen, being an activist, I've most of my life have not been an activist just because I didn't want to go through the pain of it. Being an activist is painful. It is not fun.
yeah,
It's not fun. And oftentimes you get hurt being an activist. And some of those
yeah,
kids are being physically hurt. And some of those kids are getting expelled, which is going to hurt.
yeah, yeah.
So being an activist it takes a lot of courage. Yeah.
It's about like, here's a part of self-love, right? Is about really showing up in your belief system. Again, it doesn't mean that it has to be right for someone else. It's about your authentic expression of that. And they're finding community and belonging in this place of fighting for other people's lives, actually. Yeah. Their lives and their freedoms. Um, I'm just kind of like taking this whole conversation in, um, and taking it back to when I'm just gonna like paint a kind of a thought over here. Um, when you're in conflict, or when you've hurt someone, or when there's groups of people who just hate your guts, and there's like, you're on the receiving end of a lot of harm, like hate. This is where the practices of self-love that you've developed, like personally, like you, Scott, and me, Trish, and you all who are listening, this is where those things come in. It's not like, oh, I'm self-loving when everything's good. It's like, I'm going to fight for my life, and I'm going to fight for my belief system, and I'm going to fight for the truth of what I know is right. And so that's and that's the other thing, is like, all these people on all the sides are fighting for their beliefs and their authentic expression, right?
Mhm.
So then it comes back to, can I sit and just look at their strategies to get their needs met, and what is the need?
Yeah.
So to love oneself fully, in my thoughts, in my thought process here, is like, to love oneself fully is not only just to look at yourself and accept that the vastness of your expression, and to make action towards aligning with your integrity, but also to find kindness and connection within that community. Like, for me, self-love no longer looks like just this practice of self, but to look at the greater community, as I'm like, in my self-love, my integrity is to protect community. And I think
Right.
that, or to build community, or to network, or to make lives easier, right? So some of those activists, like, they're trying to save lives. That's in their integrity, to put their life on the line to do that. And there's other people who are trying to raise consciousness, and there are other people who are it's their integrity to be malicious, right? And so it's like, they have their own versions of self-love. Everybody has your own unique individual version of self-love. And it's a really, for me, is finding what your values are, and what you're going to put your neck on the line for.
I got stuck just a moment ago on your sentence of in their integrity to be malicious. And
Uh-huh.
I wonder about that. Like, is it truly in anyone's true integrity to be malicious? And it's up for me because right now there's a person I perceive as being malicious towards me and towards my friends, the twin Ray. But is that her integrity? I don't know, because it seems to me that when we're really in our integrity, our true integrity, we're connected to our true self. And I
Mhm.
can't believe anyone's true self would actually want to be malicious. I hope not. To me, malicious comes from reptile brain reaction. It comes from when we are in a state of victim, a state of reaction, and a state of survival. And so we're malicious because we think the best way to defend ourselves is by attacking. But if we're really in our true integrity, then we're not in reptile brain and we're not in that state. I don't know. I mean, this is a philosophical question that I'm throwing out right now, you know?
Well, I think that everyone has their own unique way of doing things. You know, if we're looking at like narcissistic behaviors and certain personality disorders like that, and um, I think that I mean, yeah, they might be strategies to be safe, but I really think that there are some people on this planet because there is a vast collection of humanity. I I couldn't imagine that there's not one person whose integrity is being malicious. I just think that there's anything's possible. And
Yeah.
so and I could name some particular members of historical like political movements and other
Mhm.
genocides
Mhm.
that I think that intentionally, like it's an intentional harm, like
Yeah.
that is in their integrity to show up in such a way to cause as much disruption, chaos, and harm.
Yeah.
And I think that so maybe not for this person that you're speaking about, but there are people who definitely I think have the chosen path to to hurt.
Mm.
And it is in their integrity. So, I mean, technically, they're probably in their self-loving aspect,
Mm.
you
I
know, of
see.
like, "Hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm at,
Mm.
and this is true to myself." So integrity is a very individual, right? So,
Right. Right.
and it's really based in values. So some of my values would be honesty, connection, inclusivity. And so when I'm speaking of or speaking to those things and then making decisions based on those actions and like that's my integrity. And that's one of the pieces that I have found about my self-love, right? Is like I'm walking my talk. I'm doing the things that you know I'm in alignment with my integrity. And when I get out of integrity, I speak to that because I know that I'll cause harm intentionally or unintentionally because I'm
Mhm.
human and we've learned strategies from all over the world to and familially and to protect ourselves or like we've learned malicious strategies,
Yeah.
malicious hurt, the dehumanizations, the um and there's again it comes back to this like sometimes people want to protect others and they choose to show up in this very like grand violent way um because they don't know any other way to be heard, right? So like I'm thinking like let's just like this woman who's written these articles and I follow a lot of people who talk about cults and how they're like the dissections of that and what that looks like and like there's characteristics of what a cult is. I follow a lot of that and I've been following for years and I think that we would like to believe that people have free will. And there's some desperacy to have our needs met in such a way that people can be easily swept up
Mm.
into things that they don't understand. And then when they don't have boundaries, they get hurt. And I'm not talking about children who are forced into cults or different types of like sex slavery and things like that. I'm not talking about this like but I do think like just being innocently minded in my younger years that yeah, I probably would have followed, I followed a lot of things. I followed this like whole belief of like, it's all good and like smile and just think positively. And like, and I believed that. And it was very harmful to me. And the people who told me these things were very like, because it didn't give me the opportunity to actually feel all of my feelings and to live in this human body.
Yeah.
Like I actually had to deal with my own traumas. And that was just like a blinder to the real things. And those people ended up turning out to be like, freaking like drug addicts whose marriages failed and they became like, you know, like their lives fell apart and
Yeah.
they were not people that I could see myself as like being idols anymore. So I think that people want to belong and want connection and want safety, that they're willing to overlook their own boundaries in relationships or in religions or in spiritual leaders and not hold their own safety. And that's one of the things I think that especially like call out culture and cancel culture is really asking for is is for a new way to approach accountability
There's
and and a
there's
new,
so much there's so much I want to say.
I go ahead, go ahead.
And I want to also acknowledge we've got some wonderful people in the chat box. So I want to acknowledge Katrina, George, Dorina, Humanities team that are making some wonderful comments. So I always like to appreciate the people that are actually with us. Um, and I'm sorry for jumping in, but you had already like
That's
there were
cool.
like 4 things you had said that I wanted
I
to
know, I know,
respond.
I know, I know.
Um, First off, I agree that it's really important for us to have good discernment when it comes to choosing who we're going to listen to and who we're going to follow. And that's, of course, what you were just addressing. When you were a little girl, you were listening to what was available to you, and it turned out that their advice or what they had to say wasn't very valuable.
Well, that
Almost,
was in my 20s.
oh, okay. Sorry. Look, we all have had influences in our life that as we matured, we recognized, oh, what I believed isn't true. I mean, a
Yeah.
big one for me is when I was a little boy growing up, I thought the United States was the good guys because we beat the evil Nazis. Nazi Germany was clearly evil. We were clearly good and we won. And I grew up with that story.
Yeah.
And one of the most painful parts of my adulthood has been realizing, oh, wow, now the United States is the evil empire. We're the bad guys that arrange assassinations. We're the ones that support Israel that's doing a genocide right now.
Yes.
So there's a big disillusionment. Most of us have had a disillusionment with whatever organized religion we first grew up in, because as we grew up, we learned that the minister was actually having an affair, or we learned that, the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church has been responsible for so much death and suffering. So, or for people that grew up in more cult-like religions, like Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm not making a knock against Catholicism or Jehovah's Witnesses, just examples. But a lot of my friends that grew up in Jehovah's Witness type reality also broke away, realizing the cult-like nature of it.
Mhm.
And most of us, especially those of us that are older, watched gurus like Osho, who were great teachers, but also a lot of chaos ensued because of bad management or because of, in his case,
Mhm.
drug addiction. So, and all the gurus that were having sex with their, teenagers back in the back room. So there has been a tremendous amount of disillusionment, a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of thinking that authority figures that were presented as good turned out not to be. And we're
Mhm.
carrying that pain, and we're trying to work
Yes.
with that pain, and we're trying to manage that pain. And it's healthy to be highly discerning.
Yes.
Absolutely. And let's never give our power away to a religious figure, a spiritual teacher, a political figure. I mean, I look at the people that are following a certain political figure, and it's unbelievable to me, people that are giving all this money. Anyway, so yeah,
Yeah.
we see a lot of people giving their power away because they so want to belong to the community. They so want to belong to that tribe. They so want to be part of that thing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, self-love is like, okay, what is my truth? And again, that's why I started with real self-love is connected to divine love, and divine love is holistic in thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
It transcends the individual self. When we are in reptile brain, we're in the illusion of separation, me against the world. I just have to take care of myself because I'm in survival. And when we're in true divine self-love, we're in the awareness of everyone is part of myself. I am part of the greater whole. How can I create a sustainable world? How can I create sustainability in my family, in my relationships? And true cults that are negative cults are never sustainable. They always fall apart because they're not built on sustainable principles. Anyway, now I came back with a bunch of thoughts, so I'll.
It's
I
okay.
really, I really wanted to respond to a lot of that.
I want to answer Dorina's question. Can we address uh, the crossing over between self-love and narcissism? And well, you're in luck because I have the DSM definition of narcissism right in front of me. Because that is the class I'm in right now. So I'll read that for you. Narcissism is the extreme pattern of arrogant and exploitive behavior with a notable lack of empathy, excessive importance, self-importance, often arising from deep insecurity, grandiose, preoccupied with fantasies of ultimate attainment, belief that one is special, and a tendency to associate only with others perceived as similarly exceptional, desire for differences in prestige and excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement and envy, and envy of prestige, wealth, attractiveness. So often, so narcissism, I think, is like one of the things that's overused, and um, like the actual definition of that, I think, has been like spread around, and it's like less than 1% of people in the entire world will come up with narcissistic personality disorder. Now, there are other people who are just kind of assholes, and then we can agree that that's a thing. Like there's, and not everyone who intentionally chooses harm is a narcissist. Um, so there's the healthy belief of oneself that looks like, and I'm going to read something here, is the state of appreciation for oneself that grows from actions that support our physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. Self-love means having a regard for your own well-being and happiness. Self-love also means taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing for your well-being to please others, and not settling for less than you deserve. So there's also learning how to trust yourself, learning how to be nice and true and honest about who you are, forgiving yourself and learning how to protect yourself. So I think that there's aspects of self-love that don't include um, egotism, or yeah, it doesn't include like this aspect of egotism. Now, when we start getting into egoic places, like I'm better than other people, now we're moving from self-love into something else, right? So this is kind of the distinction. Do I protect myself? Do I think that I'm a good person often? Yeah. Am I making actions to be a good person and to treat the people that I love and even that I don't know or don't love with respect and kindness and love, dignity, and respect like everybody else? Yes. Now, when I start thinking that I'm above others or that I'm different in some grandiose way, now we're moving into an egoic space. Now we're moving into something that separates us from humanity, from the rest of us. And I think that that's where people start to like get worried about narcissism or about dynamic leadership, like the dynamic leader is the cult piece, it's like
Mm.
is when there becomes this thing that separates identity and makes other people less than. Again, it's the dehumanization. Those are
Absolutely.
subtle things. Whether I'm pedestalizing myself or degrading other people or pedestalizing other people and degrading myself, that's also dehumanization. Like when people pedestalize me, I'm like, you're dehumanizing me. I don't want to participate. I'm not holier than thou. I'm just a human doing human stuff, doing my best. I have some answers for me that I've come up with. Maybe you might want to use them.
There's a big yes to everything you just said. And two things I'd like to mention. One is how common it is now that when people break up with somebody, the first thing they say is, "Oh, he's such a narcissist." I learned that she was a narcissist. Narciss Accusing someone of being a narcissist has become the most common insult, especially between people that are spurned. What's true is most of us are egocentric. Most of
Yeah.
us are self-centered. And there's a big difference between suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, which, as you said, is a very small percentage of people, and those of us who are just doing our own egocentric thing. So I wanted to mention that.
I
I,
mean,
I really
exactly.
appreciate on the cult part, you bringing up the pedestalizing. And boy, that is a very real challenge. And I'll be honest, it's, I think, a challenge within the Twin Ray world because there are people that have them up on a really big pedestal. There are people that worship them, and enthusiastic community members have made comments about who they are that is not who they say they are, but then adds to the idea that they're presenting themselves as the reincarnation of Jesus, for example, which he is not, and he has never said he is. But it's interesting. I've watched how people that I care about, that are good, wonderful people, members of the community, in their enthusiasm, projecting a pedestalization onto the Twin Ray, and how that's coming back now to bite. And that's definitely a lesson to be learned. Um, One of the main things that I think is at the center of a cult that ends up being unhealthy is when there is not accountability of the leaders. If there are charismatic leaders at the top, are they accountable? Who are they accountable to?
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important thing that within the Twin Ray community we're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so
And changed behavior.
exactly, exactly. And one of the things I just want to say publicly, I've been talking to the Twin Ray every day since all this happened last week, and they're in a state of amazing humility. They want to know where there's been harm, and they want to apologize for any harm that's been created. They're still in a state of compassion. Their lawyers are advising them to really go after the writer, and they don't want to play the legal game. They're still in compassion. So, my respect for them, again, when somebody's under attack, it's a good time to learn how do they respond, who is this person really? And they're responding just the way I've always experienced them, with love and compassion. And I'm hoping to follow that model now that I'm under attack. Um, and and we also still have to set boundaries with compassion. Of course, that's something Trish, you and I, teach as coaches, is how to set boundaries, but to do it with compassion. Um, and anyway, I'll stop there. But that's part of my answer to you, Dorina, and thank you for asking the question, is that we do need to learn when someone consistently engages in a hurtful behavior, and someone who really suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, what makes them dangerous is that they are clinically a sociopath. They lack empathy. And people who lack empathy, we need to set very strong boundaries with.
And boundaries are how we engage with others. So I can't say, Scott, you can't treat me like that. I can say that, but that's a rule. A boundary is, Scott, you can't treat me like that, or I'm going to remove myself.
Right.
And to follow through with that boundary, and that is a huge aspect of self love. Is stop hanging out with assholes.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
when you realize that it's on me to protect myself, and it's on me to like really follow through with to check my own delusions. I think that some of us have, I mean, not like delusions in the like clinical sense of this word. I'm not like, like not having like fantasies about, you know, hummingbirds speaking English to me or whatever. But, I mean, in the way that, there's 8.5 billion roughly people on this planet, and everyone has their own perception of the world and how we think and feel about things. And so we are filtering things through our understanding from the outside world and translating it into our own inner reality. And so I think that in that way, that's what I'm talking about in this kind of like delusion. It's like in that way, we've got to check our own beliefs, and we've got to check our own nervous systems, and we've got to check our own, like, what are we present with and for. I know a lot of people who got swept up in like wanting to belong, their need for belonging, which is their desire part of self-love, and their strategies and kind of like the people they got connected to, whether it was like gangs or cults or belief systems, and how distorted it got and how they lost themselves. Oh, it could be relationships even, like, what I mean? Getting into a relationship and losing yourself. And so it's like practicing certain aspects of not only acceptance, but, protecting yourself in boundaries and really checking your own reality, like taking a step back and it's like, is this actually healthy for me? And is this, are people in my life talking to me and like, hey, you're strung out on drugs or beliefs or whatever it is, and really checking if this is the right place.
Yeah.
And so the distinction between self-love and like narcissism or egotism or whatever it is like can you check yourself and make change and take accountability? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm remembering that the show was billed as me talking about what if self-love is, or the meaning of life is self-love. So I do want to address that. And I know, Trish, you've heard me tell this story many, many times. So you can go make yourself a cup of tea because you've heard it. Um, but for anybody who hasn't heard this story, or for those of you who have, it's a wonderful reminder. Um, I've had kind of two careers in my life. For most of my life, I was a writer, director, producer, mostly of educational television, educational programming, and then also my career as a coach. And I've had the good fortune to interview hundreds of people because of the nature of the television work that I did. And one of the things I've done a lot of shows on is near-death experiences. I've done several documentary style television shows and segments about near-death experiences. And about 20 years ago, back when I was doing that a lot, the world's foremost kind of professional expert on near-death experiences was a man named Dr. Kenneth Ring, like ring on your finger. And you can Google him. He's got great books. He's really well worth reading. He's a clinical psychologist who did clinical research and comparative analysis on over 300 cases of people who had legitimate near-death experiences. He did his study over a 10-year period. He would only accept a case if it was somebody who had been declared dead by a doctor or a police officer. They needed to have been dead for at least 20 minutes. They had to have some partial memory of what took place while they were out there, and they had to be willing to be hypnotized with a professional hypnotist asking questions that Dr. Ring was providing. 300 cases, that's a lot. Black, brown, yellow, white, Christian, Jew, atheist, children, adults, really wide variety. He traveled all over the world. And people's experiences were varied. They were very, very diverse. Some people saw deceased relatives. Some people saw religious figures. And if they did, it was always religious figures connected to their archetypal, Christians saw Jesus or Mary. Buddhists saw the Buddha. But there was one commonality that he hadn't even been looking for that emerged, and it was the meaning of life. And whether it was Jesus showing you the meaning of life, or the great golden light helping you to remember the meaning of life, or your dead Uncle Fred showing you the meaning of your life, the meaning of life was always the same theme. Drum roll, please. The meaning of life is we're here to learn to love, starting with ourselves. Now, each of these people, each of these cases had their own unique challenge. I'm here to learn to love myself, even though I lost my legs in the car accident, or even though my father beat me, or even though I'm an alcoholic, or even though my business failed, or even though I've always been overweight. Whatever it is, we all have our unique individual challenges, childhood wounding, adult disillusionments. We're here to learn to love ourselves despite that. Now, what's interesting is I first learned this or heard this in the mid 90s when I was producing these TV shows on near-death experiences. But since then, as a coach, I've worked with thousands of people, literally thousands of people. And because I'm a coach, people tell me kind of their most intimate stuff, and I get to know people at a pretty deep level. So I've been able to apply that idea. Oh, if I'm working with Roxanne, how is Roxanne's wounding or her challenges that she's bringing to the table, how does that drop into the possibility that she's learning to love herself despite those challenges, despite those issues? And so I put that out to each and every one of you who might be watching. What are the challenges in your life? What's the deep wounding that you're having to manage? And what if a fundamental part of life, a fundamental meaning of life, is for you to learn how to work with those challenges, how to love yourself despite the wounding, despite the disillusionment. And it's really useful, I find, for us to consistently apply that. And actually, I'm applying it to myself right now. It's like, okay, people I love are under attack. I'm under attack. People that don't really know me are projecting stuff onto me. That's mostly negative. What if the meaning of my life is to have compassionate understanding for those people as best as I can, while still loving myself, while still maintaining my own dignity, while still maintaining my own integrity? That's kind of what I'm working with right now. So come back, Trish, come back.
I was coming. I was right there.
Oh, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's the nature of the show.
So what in your life what might be a wound or a trigger or a challenge that's going on for you that you're utilizing as an opportunity for greater self-love?
Oh, well, there's a lot of little pieces. When someone gives me feedback about my impact, the instant defensiveness comes on.
Mhm.
And then it's like, oh, hold on. I don't get to choose if I hurt someone. Like they feel hurt by my actions. So I have an opportunity to take accountability for those things. And so I sit with it from an empathetic perspective,
Yeah.
which also helps me learn how to sort of shift my behavior. So, for example, I was in a partnership with someone who I was really excited about, and I was just really it felt so good. It was like meeting someone who's just like me. And their person didn't like me. So their other girlfriend didn't just didn't like me. for whatever reason. Maybe I was intimidating, or I don't know what it was. And maybe I'm a little too eager and like wanting to build family or whatever, like we're all in it together. But some reason they didn't like me, and it caused a lot of upset between the two of them. And I was sort of like the other person, the other woman. And after finally getting clear that there was a lot of not honest, like not fully radically honest about either agenda or what was real for them, there was like some softening of conversations and trying not to. And I got really upset about, like, I felt really hurt by them, and dehumanized in the sense, like, I didn't choose to be the villain in their story. But I don't get to choose if I hurt them or not, right? It's not like I didn't get to choose. I don't choose that. Like, I hurt them. So then I stopped and I sat back and I was like, yes, I feel hurt too. And I can also take that, pause it, put it over here, and step into empathy with them. And I was like, you know what? It changes the way that I walk in and create partnership with anyone. Like, how can I be more loving? You know what? I'm setting clear distinctions way back, when if it gets too far, when I'm like, oh, you know what? This person isn't cool with me, or this person's being too triggered by my just mere existence, that the most loving action is to step out. And so I think that for me to love myself is to walk in my value system, and my value systems are connection, collaboration, and honesty. And if there's no honesty there, that's a boundary that I'm yeeting. That's the kids' terms for getting the out, and there's ways of like self-protection, but also globally thinking about how I can protect the people that I love more. Now, if I'm
Yeah.
dating people and I'm just trying to get something from them, am I really loving them? Not really. So I think in that sense of that's a form of self-love, again, accountability. Another piece is I had a friend recently.
Let me stop you on that last one, because I've a question for you.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So when you said, if I'm with them because I'm wanting to get something from them, am I really loving them? Now, I just want to stop there for a second, because as a coach, having worked with about 1,000 couples now, I actually believe that almost all adult romantic relationships are transactional. We actually are in that relationship because I want to get something from you and you want to get something from me. Now, that hopefully includes giving and receiving love, but because we want something from someone. Now, if we're solely in it because I'm trying to manipulate and get something, yeah, of course not. But most relationships, Trish, are transactional, right? And when the transaction doesn't, except for between a mother and their child, right? Or between, but even that, one could say, even that, it's transaction because the mother is hopefully getting lots of love, or she likes being needed. Our relationships are transactional. It doesn't necessarily mean there isn't love if there is still a desired transaction. That's my perspective, and I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. Again, where's the other person? Like, this is my question, is if I want something from you, like I want your time and attention and connection, and I'm willing to lie, cheat, steal, contort reality, manipulate my words to get you to give those things to me. But where are you in it?
Mm-hmm.
Am I giving anything to you? Now, mutually beneficial or universally beneficial in that triple win conversation that we've had, like, that's more loving. But
Yeah.
of course, I mean, yes, I want my needs to be met, but I also have to think about you, right? Like, and I also, like, if you had another person, I'd want to think about them too. So it's like, if I'm solely in relationship to get a need met,
Yeah.
and it's purely, it nothing, like I can't meet any of your needs, or I'm unwilling or um incapable of meeting any of those needs, is it still loving for me to show up with you? So that's what I mean. Like that's the,
Yeah.
yes, I do believe that people are transactional. What did I want with this person? Connection. I wanted to build a family with them and their partner. And I wanted that because it felt good. And I had a lot, I had a lot to bring and a lot to give to them. It wasn't the same way on the other side. Right.
Yeah.
So then when does it become self-harm?
Exactly.
Because when there isn't mutuality.
Right.
So yes, I agree in that sense. People have needs. And it's and I also want to bring up one point. Is like, can you be radically honest about the agenda? I want collaboration, connection to be heard and seen and to be met, and I don't have much to give to you. Now, that is a powerful place to move from in a form of self-love. Is can I be radically honest about what I want and be okay if I don't get that in the way that I necessarily need it in this like pretty pink box and with a bow on it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that piece. And I think that that's the shift is like, that's the shift that I would like to see in the world, if you'd like to know, is that I really would like people to be more honest about their hidden agenda or their deepest agenda desires. Like, yes, I want to be a super wealthy teacher that has like 5 homes. I don't actually want that in here. And I'm willing to teach you all of these things to do that. And I want you to follow me and I want you to think highly of me. Like, if I was just honest about that, or if spiritual teachers were honest about that, or if like political people were honest about that, then we'd all get to actually choose, and it's called consent. So
Yeah.
I would love to see that. And I think that that's a big, like being honest, radically, lovingly honest about what we want is also another place of self-love. If you can get to that place, you're like, whew, doing it.
I know that we're at an hour, but I would love to respond to Doreena's question. Do we have time for me to do that?
Yeah, sure.
So Dorina writes, thank you both. Being, quote, under attack usually refers to the personality self. So, Scott, how would you address the reasons and timing for such critique, allegations, and claims from your physical and psychological self without encountering that you are avoiding spiritual bypassing, etc.? Are there any realizations of possibly being misled, making mistakes, misjudgments, or wrong discernments? What are the lessons learned? Well, that's a huge question, and I probably should do an entire video on it because it's a great series of questions. And when I've used the term being under attack, I don't want to present myself or my friends as victim. I do want to say that it feels like an attack because it has not been objective, responsible journalism. There, the writer made no attempt to talk to me directly or to talk to the twin ray directly. She has not addressed talking to people around them that had positive things to say. It's only been collecting and spinning things as negative as possible. So that's what makes it feel like an attack. But I'm not a victim, and I want to make that very clear. Of course, there's huge lessons here. One that I just mentioned. I think there's been a problem with pedestalizing the twin ray. Absolutely. I really understand people, and that's why I made the whole pitch before. Let's be discerning about spiritual teachers or any authority figure. Let's question authority. I grew up in the 60s. Question authority was a huge part of my awakening. And so, absolutely, we must always consistently question authority. Um, that's very important. I think that, the twin ray, as I said, I'm talking to them every day. As soon as I hang up from this call, I'm going into a call with them that I have. Because we're talking about, okay, what are the lessons here? What do we want to acknowledge publicly that needs to be resolved? So there's a lot. For me personally, certainly my show, which of course, Dorina, you're a big part of, the Global Peace Tribe shows in the Awakening World, is designed to be inspirational. A lot of people, or not a lot, but some people have recently confronted me, Scott, why are you not doing an entire show about the horror of Gaza? Why aren't you doing, shows that are more politically, and it's because I want my show to be inspirational. So I choose inspiring authors, leaders, and I choose to keep it inspirational. Now, that could be perceived, and maybe what I'm seeing is, okay, well, I'm doing the inspirational part, but what about the human part? The parts of that inspired leader, in this case, the twin ray, that have a shadow side or have these experiences, is this past. I have a very shadow side past. We all have the older you are, the more shadow side past you're going to have. Okay. And it's also what's made us who we are today. So anyway, I know that we're well over time. It's 11:11 here on the
Yay!
Coast.
It's a.
Great
I'm
question.
going to address it too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Trish.
I believe that we often go too fast. It's just in the world.
Hmm.
This is from someone who has ADHD who moves very fast. I think that our brains move fast, and brain chemistry connects to dopamine. Well, dopamine is the reward system, and so when we feel inspired, or when we feel hurt, or when we feel these things, it's dopamine hits, and that's the thing that connects to the reward. Not like positive reward and negative reward, but like we're calling it classic conditioning or Pavlov, like it's like the reward system. Now, our brains, unfortunately, don't differentiate between good and bad. It just is a chemical makeup and a cocktail in our brains. So when we're moving fast, we're not actually questioning. We're not doing the trust but verify. And I think when we slow down and we really start working on our nervous systems, and we really start understanding our own inner values, our own boundaries, when we stop and we like, is this good for me? Is this healthy and safe? And we start questioning those things. That's when we question our own traumas, and like how that shows up for us in our brain. Like, are we moving from the trauma brain, like, oh, this person's bad and I'm going to run away, or just like, if we're moving too fast, if we can slow down, get into our bodies, shake out the adrenaline and cortisol, and actually show up presently and be like, I'm either like freaked out, running away, or I'm excessively interested in something, kind of like NRE or falling in love, which is a dysregulation of the nervous system. And we often do not find rational, connective thinking in these places because our bodies and our brains are being flooded with drugs, technically. And so when we stop and we're like, oh, is there anything here that feels off? What feels good? Does this feel, does this fit into my value system? Okay. And then when we're bypassing, we're unwilling to look at the harms of life, or the harms that we've caused, or like the way that we're manipulating situations. Like, who am I that my world is? And actually looking at my impact there. And so that's to eliminate spiritual bypassing, is to really look at that. And if you're avoiding, you're going to know, because that's deeply, it's called cognitive dissonance. You're going to probably have some friction of like, I believe this and I behave like this, and like the churning on the inside. And again, it's about slowing down and changing. Like, you get to actually sit down, think about it, and you get to make the changes, right? So if, Scott, you were the same person you were 15 years ago, I'd probably have some questions for you. And if you're still making the same mistake with other people, I'd still have some questions for you. If I was still making the same silly mistakes with like relationships or like friendships or overcommitting, you'd probably be like, hey, Trish, you haven't learned that thing. So let's talk about what that is. Because are you avoiding? Are you bypassing? Are you, uh, what's your discernment like? Where did you learn how to do that? And so I think that when we learn and grow and evolve and take accountability and for our own harms against self and other people, and when we start really moving from our values and just like stepping into that, that's how we really start to distinguish and differentiate between those types of things. And haters gonna hate, Lover's gonna love. It just is gonna be a thing.
Mm.
There
And
you
we
go.
just,
End rant, Scott.
I loved what you said. And I want to appreciate, we just got some nice love from Mark Denisovsky in the chat box. That feels really good, Mark, if you're listening. Thank you so much. And yeah, it's really fun to be back chatting with Trish.
Oh.
Um,
Well, if you want to find more about Scott and the Global Peace Tribe, you can connect to all of these links that I'm going to post in the chat right now. And I'm sure that Scott has a whole lot more information about all the things that we talked about. The crunch aspects as well, everything in his world, and about self-love and about what's going on more peripherally in your life.
yeah.
So check
Yeah, best
him
way,
out.
come to, for those of you watching that aren't in the chat box, best thing is go to globalpeacetribe.com, globalpeacetribe.com, and join us.
Mhm.
Join and watch our shows. We have wonderful shows that we do every week. We've got a wonderful show coming up with Marianne Williamson, Trish. I'm doing an entire 2 hours with her on Wednesday night, the Trish Memorial Night. Wednesday night, May 15th, we'll be with Marianne Williamson. This Saturday night, we've got a great show with Soul Search, collaborating with them again, Soul Search TV. So join the Global Peace Tribe and come in to the Awakening World shows. We do shows every Wednesday night and every Saturday night, and then special events, concerts, really cool stuff. And thank you, anybody watching, whether you're watching the replay. Hey, Kiki is with us. Thank you very much.
And just so you know, you can watch the replay on YouTube, and I just put in the Spotify link if you want to follow there. It's on all the podcast platforms, Twitch, X, well, anywhere you want to find the Self Love Show, it's there. And I want to give Scott a special thanks to come on and be so courageous and share honestly about self love in a time where it can be difficult. I want to give another special shout out to Roy and Russell for making the Self Love Show possible every week and keeping me on point and reminding me when I need to do things and making the graphics and just being an amazing team. So thank you so much always for your showing up and your love. And I'd like to say thank you to Scott Catamas Global Peace Tribe and all of you for showing up every day, every week for self-love. So I'll see you same time, same place